The West often claims that Africa is poor, and they make no effort to hide this narrative from their citizens. In fact, they constantly reinforce it through their media, portraying the continent as helpless and in need of salvation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every year, more money flows out of Africa into the West than the aid the West sends in. That's right, the so-called poor continent is actually financing the wealth of its so-called benefactors. One of the ways they do this? Visa extortion. Yes, we call it extortion, because that's exactly what it is. African citizens are forced to pay hefty visa application fees, and when their applications are rejected, no refunds. It's a billion-dollar scheme that exploits the hopes of ordinary Africans seeking opportunities abroad. But now, African leaders are starting to speak up. Among them is the president of Zambia, who has joined the growing chorus of voices demanding change. In a bold statement, he called out the UK and the EU, demanding that visa application fees be refunded when a visa is rejected. It's a simple matter of fairness. The big question now is, will the EU listen? And if they don't, what should African leaders and citizens do next? Let's find out. In recent years, the number of Africans migrating to the UK and other European countries has been steadily rising. But here's the thing. Contrary to what many in the West believe, most Africans are actually content to stay on the continent. The dominant narrative in Western media suggests that Africans are desperate to flee, running from poverty, conflict, and chaos. According to that perception, every African is supposedly just waiting for a chance to escape to Europe. But the data tells a very different story. According to the United Nations, the total number of African migrants in 2020 stood at 40.6 million, just 14.6% of the world's total migrant population. Compare that to Asia, which accounted for 41%, and Europe, which represented 22.5%. Let that sink in. Despite being painted as the epicenter of crisis and exodus, Africa contributes a much smaller share to global migration than either Asia or even Europe itself. So, what does this tell you? It tells you that the idea of a continent full of people desperate to escape is not just exaggerated, it's misleading. The majority of Africans want to build their lives at home. They seek dignity, opportunity, and stability, not escape. The real question we should be asking is, why does the West continue to push this narrative? This simply means that the number of migrants from Europe and Asia is significantly higher than those from Africa. In fact, 8% of African migrants remain within the continent. Only about 20% seek to settle in Europe. Of that 20%, just 8% are refugees or enter Europe illegally. The remaining 12% migrate legally, often spending large sums of money to travel by plane in search of better opportunities. Yet, due to widespread bias and the false narrative that African migrants will flood Europe, many European countries have imposed stricter visa restrictions specifically targeting Africans. Did you know that in 2024 alone, the European Union collected over 70 million euros from African applicants whose visa requests were denied? In 2023, that figure stood at approximately 56 million euros. At this rate, projections for 2025 suggest the number will rise even higher. According to the 2023 report, the EU generated 56 million euros from visa application fees paid by Africans whose applications were ultimately rejected, accounting for 43% of all revenues from rejected Schengen visa applications globally. These funds were collected from thousands of African citizens who paid the mandatory non-refundable visa fees, despite the high rejection rates they face. In essence, the EU already has a predetermined number of African applicants it plans to approve each year, yet it continues to charge non-refundable application fees from countless others, knowing many of them will be denied. For many Africans, this isn't just a failed application, it's a devastating loss.
Welcome to Stand Up Africa. This is your go-to channel for bold African stories, real news, and fearless truth. From politics to power moves, we spotlight Africa's rising voices. Subscribe and join the movement because Africa is standing up and the world is watching. Disclaimer: The content on Stand Up Africa is for informational and educational purposes only. While we aim for accuracy, we encourage viewers to do their own research. All opinions expressed are those of the creators and do not reflect official positions unless stated.
Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has launched a scathing attack on Western nations over their exploitative visa policies, demanding that they refund billions of dollars in visa application fees to African citizens whose applications have been rejected. He emphasizes that Africans should not be charged for attempting to enter Europe legally when millions of others are entering illegally through the Mediterranean route. This controversial call has sparked debate across the continent, with some hailing President Hakainde as a champion for economic justice, while others criticize him for stirring tensions between Africa and the West. But one thing is clear: this charismatic leader is unafraid to speak his mind and stand up for what he believes in, even if it means going against some of the most powerful countries in the world. As the rest of the African leaders continue to act like puppets in the hands of the imperialists, only a few have shown bravery in speaking out against the unfair treatment of Africans at the hands of the Europeans. One such leader is Burkina Faso's new military strongman, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and another is Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema. These two African leaders have become increasingly vocal in their criticism of Europe's exploitative visa policies and its devastating impact on African economies. They argue that the billions of dollars in visa fees collected from African applicants who are often denied entry are nothing more than a form of neocolonial exploitation. Now, just when you thought these two were done, Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema has come out swinging again. He is challenging the West to cough up billions of dollars that they've been unfairly collecting from Africans under the guise of visa applications. It's time for the West to face the consequences of their exploitative policies and learn that they ain't just take advantage of African countries anymore. Speaking during the official opening of the third session of the 12th Parliament on Monday, President Hakainde said it is unfair for Zambia and other African countries to continue paying money to the UK and the European Union for visas when millions of other Africans are crossing the Mediterranean Sea into Europe illegally. We need our young people to benefit from scholarships to go and study in Europe and get work experience so that they can come and help develop our country. He said, "It is unacceptable for us to continue paying money to the UK and the EU for visas when millions of our brothers and sisters are crossing the Mediterranean Sea into Europe illegally, risking their lives, and in some cases losing their lives in the process." The Zambian leader pointed out that the UK and the EU are making billions of dollars by exploiting African countries and charging visa application fees. He emphasized that if Africans are denied visas, they should not be penalized financially. Why should we continue paying money to the UK and the EU for visas when millions of our brothers and sisters are crossing the Mediterranean Sea into Europe illegally? If they don't get work permits, why should they be penalized financially? He questioned. President Hakainde called on the Zambian government to engage with the UK and EU authorities to address the issue of illegal immigration and called for the release of illegal immigrants who are languishing in European jails. He also urged European countries to invest in Africa to improve the lives of Africans on the continent rather than on security measures to prevent illegal immigration. The Zambian president made it clear that he will not tolerate any mistreatment of Zambians in the UK and has summoned the British High Commissioner to his office to discuss the issue. Hakainde further challenged the UK and EU to invest in Africa instead of spending billions on security measures to curb illegal immigration. He stressed that investing in Africa would provide opportunities for Africans and reduce the need for them to risk their lives and seek irregular migration routes to Europe. President Hakainde has promised to prioritize the welfare of Zambians living in the UK and ensure they are treated fairly and with dignity. This latest call for action comes after the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, revealed that more than 700,000 refugees had crossed into Europe via boats and other what it described as irregular means since the beginning of 2023 alone. Most of them were from Turkey, Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt. The international organization said at least 148 people died or went missing trying to reach Europe in the first quarter of 2023, but believes the real figure could be much higher. In response, European officials have accused African countries of failing to control their borders and have threatened to cut aid and increase deportations of undocumented migrants. However, President Hakainde has hit back, arguing that Europe needs to do more to address the root causes of illegal migration, such as poverty and conflict in Africa. He emphasized that millions of Africans are fleeing war, persecution, and climate change, and are seeking a better life in Europe. President Hakainde also pointed out that many of these migrants are young men who are the future leaders of their countries, and that Europe is depriving Africa of their potential by denying them the opportunity to return home and contribute to their development. The Zambian leader's call for a review of the UK and EU visa policies has been echoed by other African leaders and civil society organizations who argue that the current system is unfair and exploitative. They have called for more affordable and accessible visa options for Africans who want to travel to Europe for legitimate reasons, such as education, business, or tourism. The debate over visa policies between Africa and Europe is likely to intensify in the coming months as African leaders continue to push for more favorable policies that prioritize the needs of their citizens and promote greater cooperation between Africa and Europe. And as the rest of the African leaders continue to act like puppets in the hands of the imperialists. Only a few have shown bravery in speaking out against the unfair treatment of Africans at the hands of the Europeans. One such leader is Burkina Faso's new military strongman, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and another is Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema. These two African leaders have become increasingly vocal in their criticism of Europe's exploitative visa policies and its devastating impact on African economies. They argue that the billions of dollars in visa fees collected from African applicants who are often denied entry are nothing more than a form of neocolonial exploitation. In fact, there is a growing sentiment among African leaders who are challenging the status quo and taking bold steps to prioritize the interests of their countries and citizens. Just look at what's happening in Burkina Faso as an example. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré came to power in September last year, he wasted no time in putting his own people first. In a shocking move that sent shockwaves across the country, he immediately replaced the French ambassador to Burkina Faso with his own citizen, Mamadou H. Dicko, breaking away from the long-standing tradition of appointing foreigners to the position. This bold decision was a clear signal of Traoré's commitment to prioritize Burkinabe interests and break free from the shackles of neocolonialism. But that's not all. Traoré also took decisive action against foreign companies that were exploiting Burkina Faso's natural resources for their own benefit. He terminated contracts with foreign gold mining companies, including one with a Canadian company, Samafo, which had been operating in the country for years. Traoré argued that these companies were not benefiting the local population and that it was time for Burkina Faso to take control of its own resources. He also took on the French language, which had been the official language of Burkina Faso since its independence from Dutch rule in 1960. Traoré recognized the importance of preserving the country's indigenous languages and cultures and made the local Moor language compulsory in schools. In addition to his efforts to promote linguistic diversity, Traoré has also been working to improve access to education for children in Burkina Faso. He has launched a program to provide free primary education to all children in the country in order to reduce the high rates of illiteracy and improve the quality of life for families. Traoré's commitment to improving access to education is part of his broader agenda to empower the people of Burkina Faso and create a better future for the country. By investing in the next generation, Traoré hopes to create a more prosperous and equitable Burkina Faso for all. These actions have not been without controversy. Some critics argue that Traoré's policies are too radical and that he is damaging Burkina Faso's relationship with its former colonial master, France. However, Traoré remains undeterred and has made it clear that he is committed to putting the interests of his country and people first. His example is a beacon of hope for other African leaders who are also looking to break free from the shackles of neocolonialism and chart a new path for their countries. And Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema is another leader who is championing a similar cause. In his own way, Hakainde has been a vocal critic of the exploitative practices of Western countries, particularly the UK and the EU, and their visa policies that have made it difficult for Zambians and other Africans to travel to these countries for legitimate reasons. Hakainde argues that the billions of dollars in visa application fees collected from Zambians who are often denied visas are nothing more than a form of neocolonial exploitation. He is calling on the Zambian government to engage with the UK and EU authorities to address the issue of illegal immigration and to call for the release of illegal immigrants who are languishing in European jails. If these two leaders continue to stay true to themselves and keep pushing for what they believe in, there is hope that other African leaders will be inspired to do the same. We need more leaders like Hakainde and Traoré who are not afraid to stand up for their people and challenge the status quo. As African countries continue to push for more favorable visa policies and greater cooperation with Europe, it will be interesting to see how the UK and EU respond to these demands. Will they be willing to make concessions and improve their visa policies to make it easier for Africans to travel to their countries, or will they continue to resist these calls for change? Only time will tell. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. And you can also support us through the link in the description below. Until next time, stay tuned.